Welcome back, guys. I trust you've been staying safe. A dentist resident in Florida by name Charlie Adelson in the United States of America is currently in court charged with the orchestration of the demise of his law professor brother-in-law. As at 2 days ago, Charlie Adelson has actually denied this charge in court. But the more I delved into this case, the more surprised I got as to how some marriages can degenerate and break down to the extent that some of the members of the families that brought the marriage together, who were actually supposed to hold the marriage together, are able to now turn around and be able to do things that make them look very suspicious as co-conspirators in certain crimes that could eventually even lead to loss of life of one of the spouses in the same marriage they came together to put together. This is what has epitomized this case, and it is very, very tricky because in the mix you see exes coming in not just for coming in sick, but coming in and bringing in their current partners as hitmen to take out the brother-in-law of their ex just because this brother-in-law has divorced the sister of their ex and now battling custody of their children with the sister of their ex. Yeah, it's quite tricky, but if you follow, I'm sure you appreciate it. So, Charlie Adelson is a periodontist and he's just 47 years old. And the specific charge he's facing as at November 2023 in court in the United States of America is the charge of him hiring a hitman to eliminate his prominent Florida State academic brother-in-law, who was a law professor as well, by name Dan Markel, in his driveway in 2014. So this case has traveled about 9 years. It's a case that took 9 years in the making. Now, his brother-in-law, Dan Markel, is a Harvard-educated professor who was in the midst of a very ugly custody war with Charlie Adelson's sister by name Wendy Adelson at the time of Dan Markel's demise. So, Charlie Adelson was in court and he was being roasted, or let me say, being grilled by the prosecution. He would go on to deny any role in the unaliving of Dan Markel, but would actually admit that when the divorce happened, he made a joke about hiring a hitman to eliminate Dan Markel, but then he insisted that remark was made in jest. Now, that is what I don't get. The fact that you can make such a statement, I don't see anything that makes that a joke, especially looking at the contentious nature of the divorce and the subsequent child custody battle that ensued. That, to me, was more like an intent coming out because he was full of it. Also looking at the fact that Charlie Adelson allegedly even bought a TV for his sister, Wendy Adelson, after the divorce and told her that that was her divorce gift. You know, how does that play out? How does that play out that the brother-in-law is buying his sister a divorce gift for divorcing her husband? That means, to an extent, this guy was playing a role. That is what I am inferring, in my opinion. It makes him look suspect. Let me put it that way. It makes him look more suspect than innocent and someone just making statements in jest. Now, speaking to that, this was what Charlie Adelson said. He said that he gave her the TV set as a divorce present, and looking back now, he thinks it's the most stupidest thing he ever did in his life. And after giving her the TV, he also went on to say at the time that he was going to hire her a hitman, but that even the price of the TV was a lot cheaper so he went with the TV set instead. Now, this is very funny, tricky, and at the same time, very serious. Because as it stands now, Charlie Adelson faces an uphill battle at the trial because his former girlfriend, who has already been sentenced to life in her own trial in relation to the unaliving of Charlie Adelson's brother-in-law, Dan Markel, has now decided to testify against Charlie Adelson. Now, this former girlfriend of Charlie Adelson is called Katherine Magbanua, and she was charged with helping Charlie Adelson, who was her former boyfriend, to secure a triggerman to eliminate his brother-in-law. Now, who was this triggerman? And this is where it gets tricky, because Katherine Magbanua is the ex-girlfriend of Charlie Adelson. And the hitman that she secured was none other than a man called Sigfredo Garcia. And Sigfredo Garcia was no other man than the father of Katherine Magbanua's children. And this is where it gets crazy. So you are getting the father of your children to do a hit for your ex-boyfriend. I just don't get it. But well, I guess that's where greed and selfishness will take you. Now, Katherine Magbanua has actually denied any role in the unaliving of Dan Markel, and she continued denying this at her trial and even at this current trial, but she was still convicted and sentenced to life behind bars. So, with her fate already sealed by that, she then opted to turn on Charlie Adelson, and 2 days ago in court, she told jurors that Charlie Adelson, at the time of soliciting for the hitman, blatantly came to her and asked her if she knew anyone who could hurt Dan Markel. And you see, this is when the whole thing becomes even more critical. It's like the plot keeps deepening and thickening. So she said that she was asked this by Charlie Adelson in 2013 during a Halloween party. And that was how she then came to bring in the father of her children, Sigfredo. Now, Sigfredo Garcia has also been convicted of shooting Dan Markel and, as a result, unaliving him. So it means that as a result of this alleged hit, Katherine Magbanua has been sentenced to life, and the father of her children has also been convicted of the shooting, and he was also sentenced to life. So because of a hit for your ex-boyfriend, you've sacrificed your life and sacrificed the life of the father of your children. So who is going to take care of your children? How do you explain this to them? That some way, somehow you were so greedy, you were able to break their home and get yourself and their father into prison for life, leaving them alone just because you needed to pull a hit for your ex-boyfriend and get some money. This equation doesn't sit well with me, and I'm looking forward to the day she would have to answer this question together with the father of her children to her kids, because I don't think it's worth it. She should have looked at what was most important in life and prioritized that, and that should have been the kids. But unfortunately, that is where the case had gotten to. Now, 2 days ago in court, prosecutors were arguing that the Adelson family developed a raging hatred for Dan Markel as his marriage to Wendy Adelson deteriorated and they fought over their children. It is reported that Wendy's mother, who is also called Donna Adelson, was desperate for her daughter to secure custody of their kids and have them relocate from Tallahassee to the Adelson's home base in Miami. And when it gets to this point, sometimes I think the kids get caught in the middle because for the spouses who are vengeful, they sort of engage in this sometimes unrealistic custody battles as a way to spite the other spouse. That is how come there's a saying that there's a thin line between love and hatred, because it is very surprising at times to look at these couples in such situations and wonder on what grounds of love did they even stand on to get married in the first place, because they begin to look like bitter enemies who never shared any form of love. I pray that anybody watching this would have their marriage work and such that even if there is a problem, it won't deteriorate to that extent, but it would rather get better. I think that sometimes some family members don't actually help, because if they get to hear the issue, instead of being objective, some of them just take sides and even defend their fellow family members in the marriages when they are even wrong. I'm not saying that's what Donna Adelson is doing or that's what Charlie Adelson is doing, because mind you, Charlie Adelson, technically in the eyes of the law, is still innocent until proven guilty. So this is not to say that he is actually guilty, but he is really looking suspect. Now, Charlie Adelson indicated that he had no prior knowledge of this hit on his brother-in-law, and that contrary to that perception or that charge that he actually solicited for a hitman to unalive his brother-in-law, the narrative they should rather be looking at was that he, Charlie Adelson, was actually a victim of an extortion plot by Katherine Magbanua and the father of her children, Sigfredo Garcia. This is where evidence begins to be the name of the game, because it begins to look like it's going to be more about what you can prove, not what you think or what you know to be true. Because it seems sometimes, even if you know what is true and you can't prove it, somebody can line up evidence, twist the truth, and might have a chance of beating you in court. So it becomes very technical and dicey. Now, according to him, after learning that his brother-in-law, Dan Markel, had actually been fatally shot, Katherine Magbanua told him that Sigfredo Garcia, the father of her kids, had pulled that hit and was demanding money for doing so. He went on to indicate that he was told that failure to get them the cash would also endanger Charlie Adelson's own life, and that Magbanua kept saying that this was all her fault and she didn't know any of this was going to happen. So this is what I'm making of this defense. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm not saying it's true. But looking at the foundation of this argument, I'm thinking that already Katherine Magbanua has been convicted and sentenced to life. She's now trying to turn around to sort of take back what she said during her trial and now change her story. That creates doubt about her. The jury more likely will be like, you lied to the court already. How do we believe you now? That aside, per what Charlie Adelson's defense team are putting out, that he is not somebody who solicited for a hitman to eliminate his brother-in-law, but rather he himself is a victim of an extortion plot, then it's still going to mean that if that defense suffices, it's going to mean that Katherine Magbanua and the father of her kids, Sigfredo Garcia, are going to take the fall, because it's then looking like Katherine told Sigfredo pulled the hit, and it was all without the consent and knowledge of Charlie Adelson. But when they had done the hit, they came threatening him with the hit they've done and trying to use it to extort money from him. Personally, I think that is a smart defense. But as to whether that is true or not, I can't speak to it. I'm expecting that there should be a way for the courts and, if possible, security agencies to confirm that. But all in all, I think that this case has traveled so long, 9 years in the making from 2014. There's been ups and downs. Like I said, Katherine Magbanua has already been jailed for life. The father of her kids, Sigfredo Garcia, is also serving a life sentence for the same offense. And it looks like Charlie Adelson is also walking a tightrope. If he's not lucky, or if his defense is not strong, he could be joining them. But the dark horse here is Wendy Adelson, Charlie Adelson's sister, whose divorce and child custody battle seems to be at the center of the motive or the suspected motive for all that is playing out. She has not been officially charged of anything, but I won't be surprised if at a point there's a possibility she might get charged if new evidence begins to suggest so, because if your brother is able to orchestrate all these things allegedly, what role were you playing in there? What information were you feeding him? Is it possible you could have incited him? Because he wasn't staying with you guys, so he wouldn't know. There are things you may tell him he can't corroborate, but he might believe you just because it's you. I'm sure that the justice system will be looking into all these things, and I'm sure if there is enough evidence to corroborate anything about she inciting her brother to take that route, or she inciting and provoking him to the extent that he felt the need to put a hit on his former brother-in-law, then maybe, just maybe, she might be pulled into the conversation. But all in all, like I said, I think this is very unfortunate, because between Wendy and Dan Markel, they had 2 kids. Now these kids are being fought over by their parents, and as a result, allegedly, the suspicion is that it led to their father being unalived just so their mother would have custody with her family. How is that a fair outcome for the children especially? I believe that as families, if any member of yours enters a marriage, you as a family member, you have a responsibility of objectivity to that family member of yours who has entered that marriage. If one way or the other you get to know about a problem going on between them, please, I think your responsibility is to be objective. Don't take sides and try to escalate the issue further and increase the tension. It can easily degenerate into something else, as has played out here. Already, the life of the father has been lost. Imagine that their mother is pulled in, charged with something, and maybe sentenced. What becomes of the children? They don't even have a say in all that is going on or all that has played out. And I think it's very, very unfortunate. It's about time that couples begin to mature and learn to put each of themselves first and their children even above themselves, so that the decisions are right for the home. These are my 2 cents. What do you think? Do you think that Charlie Adelson is guilty? Do you think Wendy Adelson could be the mastermind if Charlie Adelson is actually guilty? Or you think everything is as Charlie Adelson said? He is actually a victim of an extortion or plot, and it's rather Katherine Magbanua and the father of her kids, Sigfredo Garcia, who just pulled this thing off and were trying to sort of strong arm Charlie Adelson. What do you think? And how does the mother, Donna Adelson, come in all this? Share your comments in the comment section. I'm following this case as and when updates are due. Definitely, I'm going to bring them to you. Until then, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. Turn on the post notification. Share the video. It would help another marriage or family from falling apart and degenerating into this. I'll catch you next time. Stay safe out there.